Welcome to another CEO Wisdom podcast. We have Robbie Bent on today. He is CEO and co-founder at OtherShip, which is an app that I use and that I really love. It's a breathwork app. And if you listen to this podcast, you know how bullish I am on breathwork. It's pretty much free. It's free energy on demand. It's also slowing down on demand because these hectic lives, especially since COVID, can sometimes go up to your head and can prevent you from sleeping. I mix breathwork with a bunch of things, with ice bath, with sun exposure, and with saunas and everything in between. So quite excited to dive into that today with Robbie. Robbie has an interesting background. He was working on Ethereum's ecosystem development, made the founder's pledge. So basically Robbie has good money. That's what it means. And that he has a good heart, wants to do good things with it. And he built a bunch of interesting things as well. So ambient radio waves in the environment. And yeah, he's a cool guy, eclectic background. I love those, and started his career in capital. For those that are interested into that. This podcast brought to you by podfire.com. If you want to start, scale, or be invited to a podcast like this one, or found sponsors, so that would be podfire.com. Robbie, welcome to the pod. Can you tell us a bit more about yourself and about OtherShip?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what do you want to know? Where do you want to start? That's a big question.
Let's start with, your life, the TLDR version of it in like less than a minute, and what brought you to OtherShip.
That's already 5 seconds. I'm just thinking about how to talk concisely. Yeah, so exactly like you said, I worked in finance. I always wanted to build a big business. I had a startup, raised venture capital. It failed, went through everything, every stack portion of the business, hired 100 people, had to fire them all, was the last person standing, was extremely nervous, thought I had no skill set. It's like, oh, I don't have a specific job. What am I going to do? Felt like a total failure. Got into meditation. Before that, got heavily into drugs and alcohol to deal with the depression and challenges, and just felt like, really a total loser. And, got into meditation and psychedelic medicines, got fully sober, joined Ethereum really early on, moved to San Francisco, did thousands of meetings there to help build the Ethereum network. All of a sudden had success for the first time. During the crypto crash, lost everything again. During the next bull market, did well financially. And then during that time, I'm really passionate about all the things you mentioned. I use them to stay sober. And so moved back to a hometown, Toronto, and started an ice bath in my backyard just to meet cool friends, interesting people that cared about health. So I was away from people using drugs, and my wife and I did it together with 3 of our friends. And that became a garage space for the neighborhood to hang out in, grew to over 1,000 customers. And at that point, we signed a lease, and we built OtherShip, which is a physical space primarily, a space built around massive sauna and ice bath performance. So imagine like a Cirque du Soleil meets hot, cold exposure meets sort of like a Barry's boot camp class. And so, 100 people at a time in these massive stadium saunas with music playing, and we guide people through emotional regulation classes. So we have classes on loving kindness, anger release. It's complete pitch black. You're screaming while the gong is playing and releasing. And so we use a whole bunch of different psychotherapy modalities within the hot and cold to help people express emotions. So it's kind of a new way to connect with a community that wants to feel better without really going to therapy. And then the app was so started doing that full time just because I was really passionate, left Ethereum. We're now building 3 new spaces. And then the app was just a side project that we did for our community because we're excited. And, and Saturday nights, instead of drinking, we'll have people over and do these giant breathwork sessions. And the breathwork sessions now, we've done 500, 700 person concerts at, Burning Man and Italy and castles and all these different places. And so that's something we do for fun. It's not really a business. It was just creating amazing content that people can use, that they can, a little bit easier than meditation to do, where you can feel the state change immediately and also fun. And it's just something that, we make all the content ourselves. We mix and master. We look for the scripts, we research them, we write them. It's just something I do for fun, the same way somebody would, be an author and write a book. It's just a passion to create these classes. And whether the class happens on the app or in the space, it doesn't really matter. The idea is creating transformational experiences where you have a moment, you can feel your emotions, process them, and let them go. And then now we're in the process of scaling the business to New York and a few other cities.
Fascinating. I want to learn more about your upbringing. You seem to have a very special brain that is comfortable juggling with a lot of fields at the same time: finance, engineering, building, and then spirituality and therapy. You're kind of mixing all of that together and building beautiful products. So how were your parents' life like, and how did they educated you like before 18?
My parents were very, I was like nothing unique about me growing up, just average person listening to this, really cared about fitting in, was quite insecure, really cared about meeting girls and being popular and playing sports and having fun. And like high school, I just had a ton of fun. That's where the initial substance abuse problems started. Always worked really hard, but my parents were very disciplined and very wanted me to be successful. And they were also, because they were nervous about my safety. My mom was from an Eastern European family of immigrants, and so very intense about like cleanliness, discipline, very fearful, which is great. And she loved me so much that she just wanted me to be successful, but thought the way was traditional, like you need to go to a good school, you need to, if I had expressed like, hey, I want to be creative or be in arts, my parents would have like laughed in my face. And so I always thought like, oh, to be a businessman, I didn't even know what that meant, but I thought like to be a businessman and make money, that's the key to life. And so I was very competitive as well. So I went to business school and I decided to get into finance because it just seemed like that was the way to get rich fast. But in terms of anything that made me unique, I had no idea. I was just competing with the rest for, accounting and investment banking, consulting jobs. Never really thought about what I wanted to do and what my specialty was. And what actually led me to finding my like unique set of talents was failure. And so the first, investment bank, I got a mid-level investment banking job, kind of did that. Then I left and worked at sort of a tier 2 or tier 3 hedge fund. That fund ended up imploding. And if it hadn't, I probably never would have left. You have these golden handcuffs where you're paid a lot of money and you just keep doing something you hate. And I have a lot of friends now who are 38, 39, who've been doing finance for, 17, 18 years. And they're just like, fuck, I get paid so much money. I can't leave, but I hate this work. And it's a really, it's very difficult to pick your career when you're super young. So I was really lucky at 24. I washed out of that career and said, fuck, I hate this. Everyone I look at, generalization, but everyone I'm looking at doesn't seem like their lives are particularly happy. Their family lives are great. A lot of people rely on alcohol, a lot of people cheating on their wives, very like intense culture. And I then decided, I'm going to go into startups just because I didn't know what to do. And so I had a partner in Toronto, and like I just, we decided we could try to build something, kind of thinking like, oh, I'm smart, it's going to be easy, and never really asked for any help. And that was a huge mistake. And through those 4 years, spent a ton of money, didn't know what I was doing, so hired way too many people, really kind of fucked up and blew all the money. And the company, even though we built a decent product, not quite good enough in an industry I didn't care about at all, was in roaming. So it was a SIM card that allowed you to travel and use like one global SIM, kind of like Google Fi, but before Google Fi, and completely failed. And so now I'm like, wow, I really don't have any skills. I'm like 6-7 years into my career. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have a specific role. I'm not like a master of anything. And I felt so low. But the interesting thing I learned doing that was you can pretty much learn anything super fast, like in 1 year, and 1, maybe 2 years for sure. And even in a new thing, like the ability that, okay, I don't, like you come out of school and it's like, I have my checklist, I'm going through my checklist, this is what I do to get A's. You start your job, okay, my boss is giving me my checklist, here's the role, I'm trained, I do the role. And when you start something on your own, it's a completely different way of thinking that we actually don't learn in school. And it's like, okay, there are no fucking rules at all. You can kind of do whatever you want and you can figure it out and like make things happen, and everything rests on your decision making. And so a huge mistake I made in that first role was like not asking for help and not understanding models of like how to do great work. And so the difference for OtherShip now, having done this many times. And at Ethereum, it's like, okay, we need to, implement a billing system. Like the first thing I'm going to do is find 3 people who've done this at scale and like get in touch with them by any means and interview them, and so 99% of the problems you face, no, maybe 90% of the problems you face in your business have been solved by other people. The 10% is like your unique product, which is like the value you can bring. But even then, you can look at other adjacent industries to see how they've got distribution, to see how they've done customer support, to see how they talk to their customers and implement those for your business. So I think what made me unique now was just having a failed entrepreneurial experience early and realizing like I can ask for help and get it and like be very aggressive in that. And then the other thing that makes me unique is I'm just kind of a nutcase. And so, I lived in a whole bunch of places. I've done a whole bunch of things. And the more things you do, like when I lived in Israel for the first time, you realize in 3 months, you can, 10 sessions hanging out with someone, you can become a pretty close friend. And the more new places you go, the more new friends you make, you realize the person you were in elementary school and high school is actually not the person you are. And friends are always available. And so you can't make old friends, you can't make new old friends. It's kind of an interesting saying, but at the same time, it's quite easy to make connections. And when you realize that, you can better become who you are. And so an interesting thing, I always thought I was like an operator, and I'm actually a salesperson and like visionary and excited person to be out selling. And I thought I was like somebody who was like by the numbers, by the book. And so I did that role for a long time. This was only when I became, kind of 30, 31 that I realized like, oh, my skill is actually more in building community and talking to customers and talking to investors and storytelling. And so that was really interesting as well. And so what I've come to realize is what makes you special is something that like you really had in your childhood. And by stripping away through meditation, through psychedelic medicines, through a bunch of different things, I got more and more comfortable with myself, less insecure. So, you can see I'm just wearing a fucking shirt. I'm like sweating through it. Like I don't care. And so now really what people think of me, comparison, that stuff's been stripped away from a lot of personal work. And as a result, I know what makes me tick, what I'm good at. And I didn't know that before. And so I think that is kind of a superpower. Then like what feels like play to you. So those are things that I think have changed, but only really started when I was 30. And my entire career, 20 to 30, was just middling and, filled with failures that kind of caused me to like search out this path because of like destruction in my life that then, that has helped me. And I think now I'm just also like so excited about entrepreneurship and building. Like I think about it just all the time, and like one example, I love the Founders podcast. As I heard about it a couple months ago, and I've listened to like 200 episodes, and like every day I'll listen to like just little things like that when I get excited. It's like, what are you excited about? And when you find that, like you can do that forever. It makes it so hard for people to compete with you.
Founders podcast is great. My First Million, which you've been at, Danny Miranda as well. So these are all great pods. My question for you is, with that new Robbie nowadays, like how do you deal with stress? Because you mentioned employees. I let go of 80% of my team at the beginning of this year and employ AIs. AIs do a much better job. And I just don't think humans should be in the capitalist equation, aka me expecting a return from them. I can give to humans and be charitable to them, but in a business, I don't think most people are made to work. And there's way more to that equation, but bottom line, I let go of 80%. On your side, you're scaling your team. Plus you're building physical spaces, which is also very stressful. Anything physical, I stay away from. My first business was a nootropic in Canada. And yeah, shut that one down. So how do you deal with stress nowadays?
Yeah, it's pretty challenging, right? Like there's just, as a CEO, and it sounds like a lot of your audience is CEOs, like you are the person that has to say no all the time. And you're kind of like, I feel sometimes like the villain a little bit. So, if I'm dealing with the vendor, I'm pushing back on the price. If I'm dealing with the landlord, I'm pushing back for better terms on the lease. If I'm talking to investors, I'm pushing for a better valuation or terms. If I'm talking to employees. Like I have to hold the boundaries all the time for everybody. And if a problem is difficult, like it just comes to you to solve, because you're most likely in a small business the only one who can solve it. And so boundaries are important. Learning to say no has been something. Like I'm like very junior CEO, so I've been doing this for 4 years. But I would call myself, like, in terms of communication and in terms of good communication with people, like very junior. And so I used to get so angry. That's my defense mechanism. It's like, oh, why the fuck can't this person do this? Oh my God, they don't believe in the company, which like is not true. And I would run these like stories in my head and use anger, and it was like quite stressful. So I have a therapist I do parts work with once every 2 weeks, which has been helpful. I have an advisory board. One person, one lead chair of my advisory board is a conflict resolution and emotional wellness specialist. And so anytime now I have an emotional issue, I'll just call her and ask her how to work it through. And again, it's like, find experts who know how to do this. So you're going to fire someone instead of thinking about it for 2 weeks. Call an expert, talk through. I have her like legitimately write out the script of what I'm going to say, and we talk through it. And so any type of, like, even small conflict resolution stuff, our whole co-founding team actually works with her. I also use, from like a body-based standpoint, I use the hot and cold like almost every day. And so if I'm really stressed with work, like there's moments where there's a great line from Mark Andreessen where entrepreneurship is either euphoria or terror. And so there's moments that are incredible. Like, you can see this is our Flatiron space in New York that we're opening. And it's like so fucking exciting to like see the designs and touch them and like think about the launch plan. And then in other days, I'll have periods of 2 months where it's like, man, we're going to be way over budget. We're super delayed. We're going to lose the space. Some customers saying X. And so I think there's a balance of, okay, I'm running my business day to day, doing like what needs to be done, but also ensuring there's parts of your work that you love. And like what's really changed for me over the last year is hiring the right team around me so I can do more of the things that I love, or some of the things that I love, which is like designing classes, designing the spaces, being involved in the product, working the front desk. Like I worked the front desk all weekend, which sounds weird for the CEO to do, but I just fucking love it. I love talking to customers, seeing how their experience is, ensuring like, the people on the floor are trained properly. So the learnings for me from a stress standpoint is like, get into the things you love about the business and like really have a why. So if I'm really stressed, I'm like, okay, why am I doing this? It's because I fucking love this product, and I want many people to do it. I see it's changing lives. And so I'll go in and talk to customers that love the product. And it just is always like a shot of confidence, So if you have a course, like talk to the most engaged people. If you're selling apparel, talk to your power journeyers, ask them why they use it, get them to send you a picture. So I think the best way to deal with stress is to really connect with just the why, because the daily pieces of entrepreneurship are just fucking shit. And you're going to have so many like, oh my God, is this going to work? Are we going to run out of money? Do people like this thing? There's so much criticism. Okay, there's this employee doing that. Oh my God, we're going to have to fire them. There's like so many emotional things all the time. So it's just being able to, when you're in those emotions, ground in like the why and get excited again. So I don't even think the most important is like body, mind, therapy, all that stuff. I think it's being able to, like, when you're stressed, have an outlet to understand why you're doing this, because it's also like meant to be stressful because it's fucking hard. And so anywhere else in life you can, like if you're having a negative friendship, you can kind of, maybe I'll spend less time with that person. As a dad, you cannot do that with your children. And as a dad or mom, and as an entrepreneur, you cannot avoid difficult conversations. Like you just can't. If somebody is not performing, you have to hit it head on. If customers having a bad experience, like it's a very good test for emotional regulation and like consciousness, just because there's so much conflict that happens in building a company. And like some conflict is good, some is not. So I think those are my learnings. If I'm stressed, is just to hit the conflict head on, have a coach that you can talk to about how to address conflict without emotion, and then get back into the why you're doing the business.
Very good insights again. And yeah, I call it enlightenment through entrepreneurship. It's been one of my core thesis since the last decade. It's probably at least 80% of the reason why I am more virtuous today. I think it also helps to have other CEOs and founders tell you that you're doing a great job, like me, I'm quite bullish on you and your business. You're so innovative, you're very creative, the design of the app is amazing. And I think you've got something there. You've got like an amalgamy of skills that is sort of your little moat here. I think it will eventually become a big moat. Talking about that, what do you have in the pipeline in terms of innovation? What's next for OtherShip?
Yeah, so I think one thing we didn't talk about when you asked that question before, and I kind of naturally did this by accident. And so I worked in, early stage tech, telecom, and finance, in hardware, then in crypto. My sister had owned a chain of gyms, and so I was always very big into experiences, and then personally very, very interested in transformation. So meditation retreats, psychedelic medicines, breathwork training, bathhouses because I was sober. So as a drug addict also. So, and then I lived in, probably 12 cities. And so have met, if the average person who lives in a small city has their group of 6 to 10 high school friends, I've probably met and spent time with like 4,000 different people. And so when you're in many different circles, you just can push insights together from a bunch. And so OtherShip is really amalgamation of like traditional sauna aufguss, which happens in Europe. It's the training of sauna masters, breathwork, a bunch of like therapy techniques from psychotherapy, meditation and breathwork modalities, and then somatic healing. And then on top of that, like experience with gyms, Barry's Bootcamp Boutique Fitness, and experience with my partner in restaurants and hospitality. So we've fused all those and are the first ever to offer like sauna ice bath in a kind of, hour format at a much cheaper price point. So bathhouse is traditionally 3 hours. You go, you get a massage. It's a massive environment. So we're doing this in a much smaller scale footprint. And then 2, first ever to do emotional regulation, like classes, almost like group therapy, but making them like you're at a Cirque du Soleil. So we just over time, did exactly what you should do in entrepreneurship. Started with an ice bath in the backyard, iterated on thousands of journeys, started doing classes in a garage, iterated on another 1,000 journeys, started in a small space. We've had 100,000 journeys now. The space, like what I'm really excited, the innovation is we're doubling the size of the sauna. So it's going to be the largest sauna in North America. The ice baths we created from scratch to be like legitimately 0 degrees or 32 degrees. So it is the same as like an Arctic lake, and there isn't anything commercial at scale. And we just saw that temperature was where people in 1 minute had the greatest emotional breakthroughs. So I think the innovation I'm excited most about is just opening in New York, like the first of its kind, our flagship location. Some other innovation. So the point I was making there before, though, is if you do a whole bunch of different things, you can take skills from all of them and mishmash them into new ideas. And I really don't. And if you haven't done a bunch of things and you're younger, listen to a ton of podcasts. The Founders Podcast is a story of the top 400 founder biographies of all time. Like it's all there. You can listen on 2x speed. And I think it's better. I would say it's 50 times better than any MBA. Is just listening to those 300 podcasts, one per day. The learnings that you'll get from that are insane. And so going out, when we designed this, we went to 70 bathhouses around the world, all kinds of different countries, took notes on what's the best, what we liked. And so I really think whenever you're building something, having broad experiences across all your competitors, adjacent industries is super important. Like even Steve Jobs, a lot of his ideas people don't know came from Edwin Land, who's the founder of Polaroid. The whole idea for Apple of building like the intersection of tech and culture is not Steve Jobs' idea. It's somebody else's idea that he idolized. And so great ideas come, they exist, and it's about like curating and discovering. So I really think that's a lesson listeners can take home is be very prolific in listening to many different things, talking to other CEOs, understanding how they're growing their business in your product, be an expert. And so I've done thousands and thousands and thousands of saunas and ice baths and like breathwork retreats. And, this is what I do in my spare time. My vacations are, going in a dark retreat in a cave or going on doing a Hoffman process or some type of leadership development. So that is, I think, a huge lesson to like innovate is to surround yourself with just a ton of material that you can pull from. And for us, that's where our idea came from. And now I'm most excited, to see what these classes look like when we launch in New York. The other innovation I'm super proud of is how we're doing social. So there's not many places you can go to at night where there'll be saxophone players and djembe players and DJs, but no alcohol, and guided breathwork sessions throughout a social event. So imagine you're at a party and all of a sudden on the speakers comes a 10-minute breathwork. And in the breathwork, it's telling you, open your eyes, look around and connect eye gaze with somebody beside you. And like at the end of the breathwork, it's saying like, hey, tell somebody about a meaningful experience you've had here before. And so we're kind of combining deep inner work with external social environments. So really innovating on how people actually connect in a new way. And so that to me is like our new space opens in a couple weeks in Toronto, and then our New York space opens in April. And it's really both of them are the first of its kind of social experiences. So I'm excited to see how do people interact? How do we train our guides? What can we do to like get them to become friends even faster?
Excited about it too. Last question, the 4,000 friends things, what was your system for that? Did you cold email people? Like, how did you meet so many folks?
Yeah, just generally. So like you think of like ways to meet people, right? It's usually through work. It's like a fantastic way. You join a new company, you can go to events, you can socialize. And I worked in many industries. And so there's not just the company, but there's the like conferences. So for crypto specifically, there was just so many events. And so I think it's like, what is the commonality? And you're looking for energy. And a really good way to pick a career or place is like, what is the energy you get when you're there? And so two examples. One was like telecom. I didn't give a shit about that, roaming at all and trying to build this business to make money. And like, there was no energy there. And as soon as I went into the crypto space, when like early Ethereum, you could just tell there'd be like 1,000 people show up for this like Bush League conference with just a few tables because they were super excited about the technology and people were just willing to help. So my gut says if you went to like a climate conference or some, probably AI right now is like, when there's something new that people are excited about. Another example are just not work related, but like biohackers are super intense, runners, cyclists. So you can check meetup.com and go to some of these things and join communities where people are very passionate and there's a lot of energy. And you can bond with people just about, people love to talk about what they're interested in. And usually when somebody's big into Andrew Huberman and biohacking, they're like vortexing their water. They're like thinking about this for 20% of their day. They just fucking love to talk about that. So it's so easy to make friends over a shared passion, whether it be work or some type of hobby. So, you go to a new place, you go and join some type of group, and it's quite easy to make friends. And just because I had so many interests, I made different types of people. So the people I met at a nightclub I owned, drinking and doing drugs, was like one category of people. People I met in finance was another category. I played a lot of sports and like weightlifting and stuff like that. So just having a lot of passions that you're very interested in can be really helpful to meet people. So I don't even think you need to cold email, just go to events and like do stuff with people you work with.
I think I'm gonna organize some here in Oaxaca. Gonna put some Facebook ads and entrepreneurs. My main criteria. Although it might feel non-inclusive, but just you need to start shit up, and build stuff up for me to have a nice convo together. Else, it's not super interesting for my brain. Thank you so much, Rob, for showing up today, sharing that value. Where can people find out more about you?
I'm not like super active on any social media. So I am on Twitter at Robbie Bent, and I'm on Robbie Bent on LinkedIn, but I'm not that active sharing like personal content. But you can follow us at OtherShip on Instagram for updates on our physical space and our app. So that's the best place to follow on with the business.